Hello, welcome. Thank you for joining us today at Penobscot Marine Museum. Please put questions and comments below. We love hearing from you. This is an image of Belfast, Maine in 1877. This image comes from the frontispiece of a history book written in the 19th century. The history of the city of Belfast in the state of Maine from its first settlement in 1770 to 1875 by Joseph Williamson. We talked very briefly about Belfast in a previous episode, and today we'll go a little more in depth into some aspects of daily life in the second half of the 19th century in Belfast, Maine. I love this print. There are so many details. Look at this busy waterfront, steamships and sailing ships. We can see several churches with their spires rising up above the city. Here's the Baptist church. This was the Methodist Church, now the Unitarian Universalist Church. Here is First Church, built in 1818. Both the Baptist and Methodist church buildings had tall, pointy spires here in this print, but later in the 19th century, both spires were deemed unsafe and were taken down. Today, the Baptist and UU church buildings each have low square towers without a spire, which I personally think looks beautiful. These brick buildings here are still the center of town. Colburn Shoe has been in business since 1832. The 19th century brick buildings in the center of town today are on the National Register of Historic Places. This farmhouse is also still there today. This road is now Route 1, but these fields have reverted back to woods and buildings have been built along the road. What else stands out to you in this print that you want to know more about? So I made a video of Belfast Waterfront today. I tried to climb up on a rise to get the same view as this print, but there were buildings, trees, and telephone poles in the way. So this is from lower down near the water's edge. But you can definitely see the same general view of the waterfront from here. It will start with a view looking upstream to the right with the two bridges going over the Pasagasawa. The high bridge is Route 1, and the low bridge is the footbridge, which is a pleasant walk, and it's also a good place to birdwatch. We've seen loons, a peregrine falcon, mergansers, and eagles. The harbor walk goes all along the waterfront here. There are still shipyards, including Front Street Shipyard. The brick buildings in the center of town are still there from the 19th century, and the churches. The church in the back is now the Belfast Maskers, a community theater group. That big patch of grass there is Belfast Common. This is winter, as you can see. In the summer, this water is full of vessels. But just 2 days ago, I watched them taking in the big white buoys where the boats anchor. There are multiple public boat launches to put your kayak in. City Park is down at the end somewhere there. This view is taken from Young's Lobster Pound. Of course, we got some fresh seafood while we were there. What did you notice? What has stayed the same or changed from the 19th century that you could see? The post office still stands, performing the same work, built in 1855 by Ami B. Young. This was also the customs house then. Mail was carried on the stagecoach and packet ships. Travelers also used the mail stagecoach, packet ships, steamships, and the train. Schedules are listed in the local paper. There were many different manufacturers in Belfast. making everything from clothes and shoes to axes. Men also shaped iron, cut both granite and ice to ship. You can see ads for most of the items produced in Belfast in the Republican Journal. This local newspaper was first published in 1829 after the previous newspaper folded. That previous newspaper had backed John Quincy Adams, a Whig Party member who lost the 1828 presidential election. The other party besides the Whigs in U.S. politics at that time was called the Democratic Republican Party, which seems confusing if you're accustomed to the two major party names that we have today. Two guys named White and Rowe bought the failed newspaper's printing press. White and Rowe supported Andrew Jackson, who won that election. In their first publication, they wrote, quote, "We propose to publish in Belfast a new paper, to be devoted to political, local, moral, religious, literary, and agricultural information. The political character of this paper shall be decidedly democratic, and we shall never hesitate to avail ourselves of every suitable opportunity to propagate Republican sentiments." The newspaper published weekly for years. William H. Simpson came on as an apprentice at the newspaper at age 15 in 1840. After working at a few different papers over the years, including the Boston Post, Simpson took ownership of the Republican Journal in 1858. Simpson was an abolitionist, and he thought that it was wrong for the South to secede. However, by 1864, he opposed the drafting of more soldiers, feeling the war had been too deadly already, and apparently blaming Abraham Lincoln for the high death toll and lack of resolution after years of fighting. In an editorial in 1864, he wrote, quote, "This will make, with previous called 2,500,000 men that have been called for and furnished to this administration to be sacrificed in this shocking warfare. It really seems as though Lincoln, envying the fame of Genghis Khan, is going to build a tower of skulls that would overtop that of the sanguinary Tartar." Indeed, Simpson had grounds to consider the war excessively bloody. More Americans died in the 4 years of the American Civil War than died in World War I, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam combined. What do you think? At what point is the cost in life too high, even if the cause is just? Simpson was charged with treason after publishing his anti-war editorial, and although the charges were dropped, he shut the newspaper down for 2 years in 1864 and 1865. After the war ended, he started it up again, and the Republican Journal still published weekly to this day. Did you see the ads for patent medicines? The Penobscot River extends deep into the Maine interior and provides access to huge forest land. In the 19th century, many towns on Penobscot Bay grew in prosperity around the sawmills and shipyards, and Belfast was no exception. Obviously, both of these industries benefit immensely from a plentiful supply of logs. Hundreds of wooden sailing vessels were built in Belfast over the years. Belfast was a busy port. Over 1,000 vessels came and went from Belfast in just the year 1887 alone. Some vessels you may have heard of that were built or owned in Belfast included the ships Nancy Pendleton and Ivanhoe, and the schooner Eliza J. Pendleton. Out of the many schooners in Belfast, there were several with fun names: Amazon, Mazurka, and Fairy Queen. You can see a ship being built here and lumber laid out for building and shipping. What did people do for entertainment back then? In addition to concerts and balls, Charlotte Thompson and Madame Janoschek starred in several theatre productions in Belfast. There were circuses, skating rinks, billiard saloons, dance halls, and a bowling alley. Belfast had its own baseball team. There were also whist parties, but I'm not sure what that looked like. Were they all playing cards? Whist is mentioned several times in Jane Austen novels, presented as an appropriate entertainment for a mixed group of ladies and gentlemen. The game is played by 4 players in 2 pairs or partners. If your table is filled with attentive players who are also good conversationalists, it could be a pleasant pastime. But Austen suggests that dull or abrasive players could make the game quite an ordeal. In 1865, a huge fire destroyed 20 acres of the waterfront and many homes in the center of town. This image was drawn by William Hall, who was from Belfast, and it appeared in Harper's Weekly magazine. The fire started in a boat shop. I'm picturing thin shavings of wood scattered across the floor, which would make perfect tinder. The fire spread to warehouses storing hay and other flammable goods. Searsport fire engine came to help fight the fire. Then in 1873, yet another fire swept across the waterfront all along here. This open space was cleared by that blaze. It amazes me that so much was built already just 4 years later, such as this factory and these buildings on either side. I found a fire insurance map from 1884, which lists Matthews Brothers in this building. They're still making doors and windows in Belfast today and are the longest running manufacturing company in Maine. This is now a park with a beautiful view of the harbor called the Belfast Common. There were even more large fires in 1885, 1887, 1896, and 1899. A number of different aid societies were established by Belfast residents. For instance, Eliza Burrington, Elizabeth Brackett, and Amy Cutter Sibley, along with several others, worked to start the Children's Aid Society. 2 years later, Burrington coordinated a home for girls who were, quote, friendless and destitute. The rail line was completed in 1870, and so the train is still a new feature of the waterfront at the time of this image, only having been there for 7 years. Imagine being Williamson, writing this history book, starting with writing about the first settlements in what was considered a wilderness by the Irish and Scots settlers in 1770, and then ending his book with lists of businesses, ships, and entertainments just 100 years later. A bustling city with steamships and trains. Life had changed considerably in the short lifespan of the town, and those living there in 1877 had witnessed many of these changes firsthand. Thank you very much for joining us here today at Penobscot Marine Museum. Thank you to our members and donors. This programming has been brought to you in part by the National Endowment for the Humanities, Exploring the Human Endeavor. Until next time, take care.